Okay, so you ever get this feeling like you stumble across some trend and you just know everyone's talking about it, but you're kind of like, am I missing the joke here?
Yeah.
Like back in the day, avocado toast was going to bankrupt a whole generation,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or how fidget spinners were like peak mindfulness or something.
It's wild how these things catch on.
Totally. And today's deep dive, oh, we're going there. It's one of those topics. Buckle up because we are talking about the conservative hot girl.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a headline.
Newsweek straight up went there. Bold move.
Definitely provocative, but there's actually like a lot to unpack there beyond just the label itself. Gets into how we see politics, gender, even just attractiveness. Like, what even is that?
Okay, so Newsweek kicks this whole thing off with, and I'm not making this up, Sydney Sweetie's cleavage. Apparently, it was her SNL thing, right? Where she's wearing those outfits, and get this, she's encouraging the cast to make jokes about it.
I do vaguely recall that.
Owen Yang spilled the tea on a podcast. But that's what makes it so weird that it became this whole conservative hot girl thing, you know?
Right, because it wasn't even she was in on the joke. It wasn't like this thing being done to her. She was owning it.
Exactly. Which makes even less sense why some people saw that and were like, yep, woke is dead. Like a woman's comfortable with herself. That equals the downfall of society.
And this is where understanding the history kind of matters. Because using attractive women in political imagery, that's old news, like really old. Think like World War I, you've got the Gibson Girl posters, right? Encouraging support for the troops. Or even Soviet propaganda, all those images of strong, healthy women, different time periods, different messages, but they're all using those classic beauty standards to push an agenda.
Okay, so this has been done before, but
Yeah.
what makes the conservative hot girl thing different then?
This time, it's very specifically tied to, like, the whole anti-wokeness idea, that pushback against, I don't know, what some people see as too much political correctness, you know?
So they're like reclaiming that old school idea of beauty and saying, actually, we're the ones who are truly liberated.
That's one way to read it. But Newsweek does bring up some other voices, too, pointing out that, well, it might not be so simple. Like, there's this researcher, Amy Padham, and she argues that focusing on hot girls, it might actually just reinforce the stereotypes it's claiming to fight against.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like this weird paradox, trying to challenge one set of norms, but maybe ending up stuck with others.
Okay, that's kind of deep, actually. Okay, so we've got this whole anti-wokeness thing, traditional values, but where do the hot girls actually fit in? Newsweek, I got to hand it to them. They get specific. Like, break it down into tiers.
Right, almost like, levels in a video game.
Totally. So they've got these unintentional figureheads. They put Sydney Sweeney in that category, obviously. And Haley Welch, ring a bell.
The Hawk-Tuo woman, right? She went viral.
Yes, that's her. So both of them, like, have that sex appeal thing going on, but they haven't exactly been out there, campaigning or anything.
Not overtly political, at least.
But here they are, smack dab in the middle of this conservative hot girl narrative.
It's almost like just being a young woman online.
Someone's going to slap a label on it.
Pretty much. And that leads us to Newsweek's next tier, the intentional group. These are the ones actively involved in right-wing politics, like Elizabeth Pipko, she was a model, now she's an activist. And of course, Anna Paulina Luna, she's a politician.
And their, attractiveness is definitely part of their whole image.
Very much so.
But it's interesting, even they seem a little iffy on the label. Newsweek quoted Pipko, and she's like, I just want to be me, inspire other women, politics aside.
Which kind of highlights the weirdness of it all, They're being praised for their looks, sometimes in ways that feel kind of objectifying.
Yeah.
But also trying to be taken seriously for what they actually say and do.
Okay, so different tiers of conservative hot girls. We got the historical stuff. But why? Like, why is this a thing right now?
Well, Newsweek, they actually looked at some interesting data. First up, the gender gap in U.S. politics is growing. Their polling showed way more men identifying as conservative compared to women.
Makes sense when you think about it. A lot of what's considered woke is about, dismantling systems that have benefited men for, ever.
Exactly. And here's another layer. Pew Research, they found that Republicans are, on average, older. Like, their base skews older than Democrats.
So you've got this older, mostly male group. Are they using conservative hot girls to try to appeal to younger voters? Like, hey, we could be cool too.
Possible, right? Is it desperation? Is it strategy? Is it both? And this is where the marketing angle comes in.
Oh, yeah. Newsweek did not shy away from that.
Nope. They talked to all these researchers who were like, yeah, attractive women, good for business. I mean, they straight up said it.
Okay, but hold on. We got to get another perspective in here. And oh boy, is this a different perspective. Matt Walsh and his, let's call it unique take.
He does tend to make his opinions known.
To say the least. He basically calls the entire Newsweek article ridiculous. Like men finding women attractive. That's the story.
I thought it was absurd.
Totally. And his argument, if I'm getting this right, is that this conservative hot girl thing is actually feminists' fault.
Yeah, that was his take.
Yeah.
That it's all about, like, policing women's bodies, making men feel bad for finding them attractive.
And he goes off on this feminists are the real problem thing. He even brings up his wife, saying she's the one who worries about looking good for events, not him.
Yeah, that felt pointed.
Right. Okay, so obviously women do feel pressure about their appearance, often from other women. That's real.
That's cool.
But to say that's the whole story, that there's no such thing as the male gaze.
And just to clarify, for anyone who's like, what is that?
Yeah.
The male gaze is this idea that a lot of times women are viewed and portrayed, like specifically from a man's perspective, reducing them to objects, basically.
It's about power, historically and now. So to say that this is all just feminists being dramatic ignores a lot.
A lot, especially because, let's be real, the conservative hot girl ideal. It's still a very specific look.
Exactly. It's not just like attractive women.
It's narrow.
Yeah.
And that kind of pokes holes in Walsh's argument, doesn't it? Because if it was really just about appreciating beauty, why this obsession with one kind?
It's like they're trying to say, we're against restrictive beauty standards, but also this is the standard.
Right. The irony. And it gets to, like, the core of what makes this whole thing so complicated. It's trying to be this celebration of women, of attractiveness.
Yeah.
Pushing back against that woke idea that you can't appreciate, like, traditional beauty anymore. But then it gets so narrow. It's like, okay, but which women? And suddenly you're right back to reinforcing those same old power structures.
And that's what makes it so hard to figure out, right? Is the conservative hot girl thing empowering? Or is it just reducing women down to, like, one specific thing?
There's no easy answer, honestly. And I think that's important to acknowledge. There are valid points on, like, all sides of this. The key is we can't be afraid to talk about it just because it's messy.
Yeah. Gender, politics, what is attractive even?
All of it's connected. We got to be willing to ask the tough questions.
So it's less about deciding who's right, who's wrong, and more about noticing how these labels, these narratives we tell, they simplify things too much.
Exactly. Whether it's coming from the left, the right, whatever, don't just take it face value.
Right. Think critically.
Think critically and, like, don't be afraid to question even your own assumptions, you know?
That's good advice for pretty much everything, honestly.
Pretty much.
Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today. Sydney Sweeney, the male gaze, even a little bit of U.S. politics for good measure. Exactly. And on that note, I think it's time for us to step back, let our listeners ponder this one for themselves.
That's what the deep dive is all about, right?
You got it. Until next time, everyone, keep those brains working, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you then.